PC builds, looking at motherboards, RAM, and GPU reports. 1. Examining motherboard throughput. Bus width and bandwidth for the win, and what truly makes a system snappy. 2. Examining RAM necessities. How does RAM work in the Linux scheme? How much RAM do I need for the job? Servers, home theater PCs, desktops. How do I get to the smooth web browsing experience? 3. Examining video card power. What to know about bus types, speed and throughput. What does a Linux home theater PC use from the video card? What does it need? 4. Tools to use. Everest versions, a Windows program, hardware info, and command probes for Linux. Getting a hold of a nice boot disk, Pyroms and the like. Episode number 1. Nominal things you need, how much memory's on there. You come down to what I believe is, the main gist of the tool here that you need. It's the motherboard section of Everest. You see right here, this is an old system. It's using the DEC Alpha, and it's 64-bit. And, the clock is just doubled. This is the most important thing here that you're going to get from the whole story. The bandwidth of your motherboard. This is what makes a system snappy, bearable, what it can do. You can see here the memory, 64-bit memory, DDR. We're way past that now. And you can see, once again, the bandwidth is repeated. So keep this number in mind, 2133. Now let's look at something closer to us. I'd say, honestly, 2 generations back AMD. It's a Tolman. And I'm running it off of a BART pre-install environment boot CD. It's a Phenom, so we're about 2 back here. And we're DDR2. Let's go to the first thing that's interesting. The overclock. Alrighty. The DRAM ratio is always a tip off, of how later your system is. And it has a 1800 Radeon 1800, so we're a little back in the day here. But here's the real part. Keep on scrolling down. Okay, the motherboard section. Now AMD's don't really have frontside bus, they have hypertransport. But you still get the good number here. First off, look at this, we're 128-bit for your memory, DDR2. But this is a real interesting number that you have, 1280. So, this thing can cruise the net with ease. It can do a lot of things. It's a desktop, pretty much. let me see. I got another report here I want to show you of a dual core Intel. Has a Radeon 1900. Let me scroll down to the first overclock. Okay, we get to overclock. And what we can see here, we're closer to our time period's DRAM ratio. And recognize the motherboard. I don't think the other one did. And we're, Radeon 1900. They've already changed the scheme. In fact, they're AMD now, so, you can tell how old this is. Let me go back. Go down, to motherboard. Alrighty. 64-bit here. Oh well. And then, the bandwidth. But if you noticed that, Intel still kept the front side bus idea back then. I don't know if they've changed now. They probably have. But you can see that our bandwidth here is much higher than what the Tolman was, even though this is an economy dual core. I think it's much earlier than the Tolman. What changed it is that it is overclocked 28%, so we come down here back again. This shows you right here old. You get fantastic, I wouldn't say fantastic, but definitely better than optimum bandwidth with these type of systems. And we'll go back here to look at the Tolman. Even though you got probably a better RAM scheme on it, you have a very nominal desktop here. Okay, let me see what else I was going to show you. Alright, let's really go back in the day. This is a report from, I don't know if any of you remember this, but an AMD K62 running, on the MVP3 chip. And, does anybody remember this? S3 Trios? Sound Blaster? This is a fun box made for running DOS games. Let's go down to the overclock. Running at a frontside bus of 100 megahertz. This is utterly painful to even think about cruising the web on something like this. Keep going back. It's fantastic for DOS, of course. This system would have cost thousands of dollars back in that day. 64-bit, look at this bandwidth. We're in the triple digits, while on the other we're at 5 digits. It's just amazing how the technology has advanced in 15 years. Okay, and now just to show you, I was going to look here. Okay, I showed you a little bit about bandwidth, bus width and bandwidth, and what truly makes a system snappy. So all I'm trying to tell you is that if you have a bandwidth, a throughput of something in the 10,000s or higher, you're fine for a desktop. With your RAM necessities, how does RAM work in the Linux scheme? Much different than Windows. Windows, you always have to be kind of concerned about your RAM, because usually you're using Windows as a desktop. You're not really using it as a server. But Linux, it uses all its RAM. It loads whatever you're doing into RAM, and if it can use it serially, let's say a home theater PC, you're watching a video, the video loads up into RAM like a cache, and it accesses it serially. So trying to say it's when we were looking back in the day, excuse me here, look at the fun box. We're talking RAM that was, my God, let me see, come down here. Oh no. Let me see how much RAM was on that mother. Let me see. Anyway, it didn't have but Let me see. Chipset. Look at that, 128. Okay, this isn't a good example. That's just a ridiculous example. Let's look at that first ASRock. Okay. RAM. Growing up. Okay. This thing has, I guess, a gig of RAM on it, 2 512s. So, going back to what we're talking about, cancel that. How much RAM do I need for the job? For a server, I would say a gig of RAM. If you're really slick, you could probably make a server with 512 of RAM. But the thing is, at best, it can only do light servers. When we talk servers, we're talking like, let's say a web server, maybe a gig of RAM, a NAS server. You want to have throughput. Look at this ASRock. The throughput is not very nominal for, you're going to be sitting waiting all day with 2133. If you're backing up files, and plus I don't even know if it can handle SATA without a card. What I'm trying to say is like, let me get over here. You're going to need at least a gig for a server nowadays, as of 2012, And home theater PCs are an interesting thing. It's like, I've seen on some people that put together them with 4 gig of RAM. And that's really, to me, it's much more than optimum to have that much RAM. You can get away, yes, with a gig of RAM on a home theater PC because it's just loading up a file serially and accessing it. And, I would say a gig of RAM for a home theater PC. And of course for desktops, you want to have as much RAM as possible because that's just the nature of desktop. You're using it, workstation, gamer, whatever. This, I'd say about, a gig of RAM. Servers, a gig, maybe, a little more, depending on what you're trying to do. But a server is a wonderful thing because it can be headless and just leaves out a lot of materials that you would need from a desktop. So if you run over an old computer, one of the first things that's going to crash your mind is how much RAM does it even have on it. Now, I don't know if you guys get into tablets. I get into tablets too. And they're trying to sell tablets now with 512 of RAM for, it's useless. You cannot cruise the net on 512 of RAM. If you want anything smooth, it has to be, I would say at a minimum, a gig, if not higher. I wouldn't even say it at a gig nowadays. You need to have at least, 1500 or 2 gigs of RAM to get any smooth web browsing experience. And of course, tablets, they don't have as much software to prevent ads, from popping up. So you really would be, stuck with a real dud if you have something 512. Just my advice to you. Let's get to this part. Examining video card power. And when we use the system reports, it tells us the bus types. So let's look at that ASRock. It was 8, wasn't it? AGP 8. Let me see the overclock. Maybe it's on the motherboard. Hold on. It does have a GB. You get a lot of great information with this tool, Everest. And let me keep going down. The memory, chipset, CPU. There it is, GPU. So look, let's talk GeForce 6200s. They have been, far outclassed, running at 8. 64-bit card. Now that's not necessarily bad for a card that's being used for a theater chip card, okay? For a gaming card, of course, you need something much bigger than that. But for 64-bit, you can actually get away, I believe, on a theater PC with that. You have this bandwidth of that. But of these two numbers, let me say, the bandwidth, this is a more important number for anything with, real robustness to it. Everything else, is just going to be your typical information. But you're really looking at the bit. And let me see, does it show your memory? Yeah, this saves your own RAM. That's all this is. Now, let me go back to this question. What does a Linux home theater PC use from the video card, and what does it need? Now, what I've seen in my own evaluation of using XBMC is that this is true with Linux. This is the gap between proprietary and open source, is that it really doesn't use a lot of the capabilities of the video card. So if you have a real powerful video card and you're sticking it in a Linux home theater PC, you're just going to be using, I wouldn't even say, a third of the card, of that capabilities. And also it depends on what flavor of the card it is. If it's NVIDIA or it's a new AMD ATI or Intel, what other cards they have, I don't know. But what the Linux home theater PC needs from the video card is probably the latest generation of the theater chip. On NVIDIA they call it Pure Video, and I don't know what they call it on ATI. But if you can get an affordable, a very quiet, maybe fanless or a little fan on a video card for your home theater PC, something that's very, very, I want to say plain, a better word than plain, but very nominal. That's really what you're looking for. You don't want to spend a lot of money on a you're going to be not getting your full money's worth with that sort of video card setup for a Linux home theater PC. I'm sure you can do a lot of things on the Windows, but I just never had a chance to try it yet. Now, this whole little speech I'm giving, the little lecture, this is the important part. I would say the tools to use. In doing this in this lecture, I used a lot of Everest motherboard reports, which is a Windows program. And some of you are Linux aficionados, but what that is you need to get a hold of a really nice boot disk, like Hiram's and the like. There's a lot of flavors of boot disks that are out there. And once you're a new system builder, you're putting things together, you're troubleshooting. Once you get a good boot disk, you can really do some fixing. Repair and healing of systems that you have. And, maybe you get it off the web, or maybe a friend can let you do a copy of their ISO. Now, let me go into the Linux part of, let's say you want to dig in using Linux to see what's going on with your system. Let me show you what a Linux report, a hardware info report, looks like. It's very Spartan. Doesn't have a lot of information. Shows your video card. This is everything, of course, that the system can pick up, just like the other ones, of course. But just, it really is not as robust as Everest. It shows you the CD and then the card type. But then you look at, Everest. Look at the ASRock, just starting from the top, just oodles of information. And after you use this tool enough times, you just know a really good idea of you feel a lot more secure in solving problems on what you're getting after. Your sensors. It just pretty much is a little bit higher level than anything Linux. And you try hardware info, and then maybe you learn your command line probes and stuff, LSPCI and stuff like that. But the main thing here is that you get a hold of a real nice boot disk like Hiram's. I've seen the Universal Boot CD, German Police Boot CD, Ultimate Windows Boot CD, and of course the BART pre-install environment boot CD, if you can get that. They're all handy. If you're concerned about diseases or viruses, you just have to use your sense of which CD. The big names, Hiram's. Of course, these people are just for giving you the tool that you need to fix your computer. So it's just viruses. I don't know. I've never heard of a virus off a boot CD. I haven't got one. In fact, they have virus programs on the boot CD to help you detect. If your system gets down with the virus, you can use that. It can help you get into systems like if you lost a password. They're so handy. If you're a beginner, I would have to say that one of the first things you need to do is get yourself a good boot CD. Just look on the web, use Google, something. Let me see if I covered all the bases here. I think I did. Snappy, it's dependent on your bandwidth, and we're talking, 5-digit bandwidth. If you're going to be using it for a desktop, or let's say, the home theater PC where you cruise the web, you can't. let's say the age of single core has pretty much gone by as far as, desktops and HTPC, though you can still use them. But, what I'm trying to say here is that you're looking at the bus width and the bandwidth of the motherboard, not necessarily how much power is on the chip or the video card, but it's the bus width and the bandwidth on the motherboard that's going to make that thing work. And I've hopefully explained to you how RAM works in a Linux scheme. It's like a cache serially. And how much RAM do you need for the job? Servers, like about a gig. HTPCs, you can get by with gig. Desktops, nowadays, probably tomorrow will be 16 gigabytes that you need. And to get anything smooth, you're going to have to be, I'll change it up to 2 gig right now as I speak. I mean, you need to have RAM to do web browsing. Video card power, I'll talk to you about bus types. If you're sticking around 64-bit, that's like beginning. If you get something higher than that, 120, or even, what other schemes they have now, please do. And what does the Linux use from the video card? Not very much. So you can save some money there if you're just making a home theater PC. Of course, you don't need a video card for a server, really. You can run it headless or run it with just a cheapy video card. Well, I hope this is interesting for you. This is my first video, and I hope we get better with it. Have a good one. Take care.